Hi. Hello?
Did you turn yours on?
Oh, we perhaps been switched off here.
Hello? Hello? Testing? There we go. And which one do you want to use?
I was going to use this one.
Okay.
This is standing.
Is this one on?
I have no idea. No, it's not. Let's see if there's no.
Hello? Yeah. On peut éteindre, on va laisser lui-même. Are we going to turn off this?
Could you turn off that light, or do we need it? I think they might.
Yeah,
want
we
it.
need it. Okay, we're going to keep it. On va la garder.
Okay, let's. If we may, could we start the final session of the day? It's a tremendous pleasure to welcome our neighbour from across the Hudson, Florent Masse, who teaches at Princeton University. Princeton has been very fortunate to have Florent in their Department of French and Italian. He's developed a language teaching program that works through living theatre. And this program has grown and grown so that it encompasses now not only a theatre troupe, but regular exchanges with the Conservatoire in Paris and an annual theatre festival called Seul en Scène. Florent has recently had a semester of sabbatical that's enabled him to go and look at the way actors are trained in different parts of the world. And it's on the basis of the work that he did, the research that he did during that semester, that I invited him to speak today. So without more ado, Florent, your floor is yours for talking about training actors globally. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I'm delighted to be here, and thank you so much for your invitation. I would like to say how I am also honored to be part of this conference in honor of Tom Bishop. Tom, I have admired you for a very long time, and I remember the first years when I lived in the U.S. I would always look at the brochures of the Maison Française, all the people you had invited, public figures, playwrights, actors, directors, and I was in awe every time. So you've been a model ever since I have set foot in this land, in the U.S., to live permanently, and it's very special to me to be here today. Just briefly, I would like to tell you a few things about l'Avant-Scène at Princeton. It's a French theater program that exists, as Sarah said, in our department of French and Italian. And l'Avant-Scène is both a curricular program now and a co-curricular. So curricular, I mostly teach French theater courses, practical French theater courses, and co-curricular, I direct a troupe of about 15 to 20 students who work with me for 3 or 4 years as undergrads, or even more years when they are graduate students. I usually have them 4 to 5 years. So that's the program of l'Avant-Scène. And the program started at Amherst College, then I brought it to Princeton University, where I was fortunate to develop it along the years. So during the year, we mostly put on plays, French plays, or Francophone plays, about 4 to 5, and the courses are also developing quite well. I will tell you today about one particular course also that I just led and directed last summer in Paris and Avignon called, it was a global seminar on French theater, so that'll be also of interest today in my presentation. At l'Avant-Scène, I try to recreate French theater and try to adapt it here in the US for undergraduates and graduate students at Princeton. And I've always been traveling to Paris, and the Conservatoire, classes at the Conservatoire, have been for a very long time my source of inspiration. So I have been trying to emulate, trying to draw inspiration from the training at the Conservatoire in particular. And I travel there. Usually I go to the end of your showcases. I never miss them. Or in June, you have many, many schools in France that are offering showcases of work. And also with my students, we've been fortunate at Princeton to travel to Paris a number of times, usually at the height of the theater season in late January. We go to France, we go observe classes at the Conservatoire, and also attend plays. And when I received a sabbatical for one semester, I thought that I wanted to broaden the scope of that experience and go see what they do in other drama schools around the globe. I decided that I would look at mostly conservatories or national schools. So I went in 3 regions of the world. I went to Europe. I explored more theater schools in Europe. I went to Asia and the Pacific as well. I went to Australia. I went to Melbourne and Sydney. I also went to Japan, to Tokyo. I went to China, went to Hong Kong as well, Hong Kong and Shanghai. And in Europe, I went to Strasbourg, spent more time in Strasbourg at the Théâtre National de Strasbourg, London, of course, with the great schools of LAMDA and RADA, as well as Berlin, where I went to Ernstbusch. So that was important to undertake this project, to look and see what I will find, looking at all these schools around the world. Well, the first thing that's important to say is that they differ. They are national schools or big conservatories, but they differ in the programs they offer. You have some schools who are very tiny. Like in Tokyo, I discovered the drama studio of the New National Theatre of Tokyo. That's one of the only theater schools, per se, resembling a Western drama school in Japan, where most of the training is also taught by masters to students, and there's affiliation in traditional arts training. So that was quite fascinating to discover the small, tiny school in the middle of the skyscrapers in Shinjuku in Tokyo. Because I was also very interested in the built environment of where the schools are every time I traveled, not just spaces inside the school, but also outside, where it is located in the fabric of the city. That was important to me. And so I went, started going to looking at the small schools or much bigger schools in Shanghai. The Theater Academy in Shanghai is pretty big, has hundreds of students enrolled at the Theater Academy in Shanghai. So a completely different environment. And of course, when I mean programs, I mean that sometimes schools have theaters attached to them, such as the TNS is very particular because there's a theater, a professional theater, a national theater, one of the only national theaters outside of Paris, located in Strasbourg. So that changes the dynamic of the school. And you also have programs that also teach directing, teach design. At the Conservatoire, as you know, they only exclusively teach acting, though in France, one of the traditions is that a lot of directors have first been trained as actors such as Olivier Py at the Conservatoire. So that's also, from the onset, important to consider that these schools are different. However, these were important, prestigious schools. In Australia, I went to Melbourne, to the Victorian College of the Arts, and Sydney, it's NIDA, the National Institute for Dramatic Arts. These are prestigious schools with prestigious prominent alumni. I was mostly interested in that, not just specialized schools or theater departments in many cities in the world. Some departments are thriving in some universities, but I looked at school, and I looked when I discovered them. I was interested mostly in looking at trends that are common within these schools, and what I discovered is that there are many questions that are common with all these schools. One of the questions is how to train actors. Do you offer them a series, multiple short-term classes, master classes with a lot of different guest artists, teacher, or do you mostly train them with a master for 1 year, or even sometimes 2 or 3 years, only working with one person? So that's usually what programs, what schools have to decide. And I've noticed that the prevailing trend is also the prevailing trend in Hong Kong, inspired also, I found it in Japan, is the Anglo-Saxon drama training with a first year dedicated to detraining actors, offering some sort of a moment where the school will try to detrain an actor, to start from the basics and start anew, afresh, to train them. I found a common point within all these schools, this desire in the first year of training to somehow start from zero and try to retrain the actor. I found that the importance of body training nowadays is very important. I found myself in acrobatics classes, in movement classes, combat classes. I was usually invited in the morning to attend these trainings at the Conservatoire. The new director, Claire Landarcueil, has decided to improve movement, body training by desiring that classes at the Conservatoire now start with a training in the morning for all the first years and second years. So now I found that the importance of body training movement is very important all throughout the drama schools I visited. Another thing that was important is, indeed, what to offer. Do you offer the one master during 1 year of training, or do you offer a series of guest artists? That's something that they often discuss a lot, and that's something that's important for schools to offer in their programs. And there was a prevalence of this, I would say, Anglo-Saxon way at training, with the first year dedicated to movement, first year also dedicated to work with the Stanislavski method. I found it in Hong Kong. I found it, of course, in Australia, in both Melbourne and NIDA. They were really working with this method, applying it during the first year, and that was very important to the training. In fact, in Melbourne, that's important. They work on Chekhov, they work on Ibsen. Poetic realism has an important place in these schools, and that was prevailing in these different regions of the world that I visited. The second year usually is devoted to more classical drama, classical training, and they often do Shakespeare or Jacobean theater in London. And then the third year, they will be doing mostly postmodern or contemporary theater. That's what they're interested in, usually in the third year. So that was a prevailing image or scope of drama training that I found. And I found many other similarities or trends nowadays. Schools are very, very keen on diversifying the student body. And that diversity now is quite relevant. That's the case in Japan, where the people who greeted me, the deans, insisted and told me that students were not just coming from the Tokyo area or more urban areas, but they were also coming from different parts or remote parts of Japan, and they were also happy of this development. Then in Paris and in Strasbourg, the question of diversity is very important now. In fact, when I took my students recently to France during the global seminar, they were surprised, shocked even, that there was a lack of diversity on the French stages, and that's the first thing that struck them, the lack of diversity. I also remember a dean from a drama school in the US coming to the Conservatoire and attending some showcases at the end of the year and telling me also that he was very surprised at this lack of diversity on stage in the schools. So as of now, there's a real development towards more diversity, and there's an exciting, very, very exciting work that's being done in France with the Comédie de Saint-Étienne, where they're trying to develop some sort of a preparatory course to help students of less privileged backgrounds to come and train in order to help them take the competitive exams to enter the Conservatoire or the TNS. And also support them take the exams, because it costs money when you come from the provinces. You come to Paris, you need to stay in a hotel one night, you need to pay for the train. So there's definitely also a concern for more diversity that we now see in French schools, but also, as I mentioned, in Japan. In Australia, they were also happy to tell me about students of Aborigines origins in the schools, in the programs. That to them is very important, and they told me about it quite immediately, about this development. Another common trend is students are concerned for time on the stage. They tell you about this. To them, the school is a tool to create their own work, present it and perform. And to them, spending time before an audience is very important. And I've been attending some showcases of some schools when I was fortunate to travel at the time when there was a showcase. And I would see the showcase and I could judge in the showcase at the end of the 3 years, the quality also of the school. I think it's a very important moment. Some programs, I felt that some programs may not give enough time for students to spend on stage, rehearsing, practicing, or being, in a play, practicing with their peers or presenting plays within their own curriculum. Some schools have a tendency, I found, to really offer technique, offer very, very structured training, and yet when you see the showcase or when you attend rehearsals of third year students, that was the case in Australia, but I will tell you a little more about Australia. I found that they lacked experience. So to me, it was nothing like what I had seen in Paris or even London, where I was very impressed in both Lambda and RADA by the training, the quality of training. So that question of having the chance to do your own work, directing a play with your peers, a simple play, a carte blanche, as they call it at the Conservatoire, is to the students very important. Until the end, they worry, or to them it's very important the time they have on stage, the role they will have in the showcases at the end of the year. So an important concern. It's a tough job also for directors of these schools to constantly improve and listen to them and evaluate the program. About programs, sometimes I was presented with very structured curriculums, and sometimes, like in the case of the Conservatoire, I found that there's constantly a desire in Paris to improve, evaluate the programs, and constantly improve. And I think it's a good way to look at things, because you can never rest on your laurels. You ought to always improve the offerings. To young students who are very talented, they're excellent, but they also worry. They're also fragile in many ways in drama schools. So I found the question of constantly evaluating the programs is an interesting way to also answer their needs and their worries sometimes. At the Conservatoire, for example, the second years, to come back to this idea of what kind of training do you offer? Do you offer master classes or short-term classes with multiple artists for 3 years? Stage, if you will. Or do you work with one master for 1 year? And the Conservatoire does it in an interesting way, because now, for example, the second year, the first semester from September all the way to the end of December, students will work with a lot of guest artists. They will be doing a lot of master classes with different artists. And then, starting in January, they will only work with their one acting professor d'interprétation, and they will work with him or her for the rest of the spring without interruption of a lot of different master classes or guest artists. The desire is really to constantly improve. To come back to stage time, at the Conservatoire now, the importance of movement, of also training the body. We talked today throughout the conference about our French theatrical tradition with the importance of speech, the importance of le dire. It has une grande place. But one of the, now, this desire to really put the focus on movement training, the body training is making very interesting progress. And I would say that the students are definitely, you see a change, you see a good, really good evolution in terms of body training. However, the first years now, the Conservatoire do not participate in end-of-year showcases. They do not have Journée de Juin for the first years. So maybe for some of them, they will lack the time on stage before an audience. So you see these questions, they are at the heart of drama training, I found. Another common trend that I found in all these schools that I visited is a desire to also create international partnerships. And international partnerships are quite complex to create, to produce, to mount. But wherever I went, schools or deans would tell me about the programs they have abroad. The drama studio of the New National Theatre of Tokyo, in their third year, they travel to Lambda. They have a partnership. The Conservatoire has a new thriving partnership with the École Nationale de Théâtre of Canada in Montréal. And they've done it last year for the first time. They exchange a faculty, but they also exchange a group of students. And they are reiterating the experience this very year in November. So a group of 50, half a class composed of 30 students. 15 of them are traveling to Montréal to be trained by a professor there. And the 15 students from Montréal are traveling to Paris, being trained by the professor in Paris. And then they exchange faculty later in the year. They also have an exchange with Barcelona, an exchange with Norway. The professor from Norway will teach Ibsen. That's exciting. Within the European frame, they are developing these exchanges, and also Canada, which, of course, with the Conservatoire has a language. Other examples with internationalization, you've got, I mentioned Tokyo, I would like to mention Australia, Melbourne, also showcases of the third years this year went to a festival in Germany. So the students of VCA got to perform at this festival. And there are many schools encourage their students to also travel and present in festivals for students across Europe. Ensbusch in Berlin also encourages a lot of international programs. At Princeton, we have welcomed the Conservatoire on 3 occasions. That was groundbreaking because it was the first time the Conservatoire was traveling really, really abroad and far away for a 1-week immersion at Princeton University, but they attended mostly rehearsals and classes in the program in theater at Princeton in English. We did it for 3 years, and we are going to maybe do the same with the Théâtre National de Strasbourg at the end of the year. So that's an important concern right now, and trying to train a more global actor, someone who will go abroad, will have a different experience, traveling abroad and going to other schools. Students, of course, love to travel. They tell me how excited they are when they do these programs, but that's also, it's more than international friendship. It's also looking at other traditions or other ways to work, and that's quite present today, these international exchanges. So these are the trends, the common trends that I've noticed. I've also noticed particularities, or really programs that are really localized because of the particulars of the place where the schools are. In France, there's a new program that reunites important schools such as the École Normale Supérieure with other schools of excellence, and also art schools, like l'École des Beaux-Arts or the Conservatoire National Supérieur d'Art Dramatique. It's called PSL in Paris, Paris Research University. And within this framework, this new framework, more partnerships between the schools are implemented. There's one exciting moment in the academic year at the Conservatoire, where students from all these art schools reunite, they get together, and the student at the Beaux-Arts takes a dance class or takes an acting class, and the student at the FEMIS also takes the acting class, and the student at the Conservatoire will take a screenwriting class at the FEMIS. So they do these exchanges. In Montréal, they have a special training section with a company that does video games, because au Quebec, they are very, very excellent with video games. So apparently, they do a lot of voiceovers. The students are trained in voiceover for video games in Montréal. The director there told me about this, and she was very excited about this particular training. In Tokyo, they work with the New National Theatre of Tokyo. In fact, this is where they perform. This is where they also perform and participate. That's also important. And many, many other particularities depending on the environment of the different schools. To directors and to deans, what's most important is to create, of course, a community within the students, and they want to give them the tools to create the theater of tomorrow, the new theater. And I think a good way for a school to see whether it's training its students well is to see what its alumni are doing after graduating. And we mentioned today Julien Gosselin from the École de Lille, l'EPSAD, but also Thomas Joly from le TNB, l'École du Théâtre National de Bretagne. I could talk about le Birgit Ensemble that Christian knows well, also graduates from the Conservatoire. Collective, when collectives are being created within the schools, when groups of artists get together and decide to work together after graduation, this is when schools are very, very proud of their training of students. So they tell me a lot about this, the importance of that, creating the environment for them to be working together. When they graduate, they want to continue and work together. And that's healthy for schools, and this is a good way to see if the school is healthy and doing a great job to bring together students, but also give them the tools to invent the new theater, not just reproducing theater, not just as a conservatoire to conserve and to keep, but also to invent new forms. And I think that's an important difference that I've noticed, that if the program is doing a great job, then it's offering these tools to students. It's offering them these tools. I also undertook this project also to learn more about the different traditions as well, and to enrich myself, to see what they were doing in training, but also to discover more of the local traditions. In Japan, for example, I discovered the underground scene. I had to really look for it in Japan, to look for theaters. I was fortunate to visit the Shizuoka Performing Arts Center. Yoshiji was a fantastic host for one day. That's a wonderful example of a great theater in the prefecture of Shizuoka that resembles our CDN, our Centre Dramatique National that we talked about earlier today. Very interesting to discover that. But I also discovered some more depressing also environments, such as in Hong Kong. In Hong Kong, there were only commercial theaters to discover, mostly. And traveling the world and discovering these different schools, I also discovered that sometimes it's also quite poor, the offerings around. I mean, you have big performing arts centers, and they offer maybe The Lion King, or they will offer the only main touring, I would say, show, such as La Flûte Enchantée by Peter Brook, that you can find, or the Bourgeois Gentilhomme by Denis Podalides. You will find these shows. I mean, they are great shows, but you don't have the sense that there's much on offer in these cities that New York, London, and Paris are quite exceptional. So I also looked at what's there for students to see, what's there to students to continue their training outside of the school, not just inside the school, but what do they see, what do they go see? And how accessible is the theater? That's another important question. And how encouraged they are to go to the theater and see things, and can they easily go and attend? And when you run into students at events, that's also quite positive. And to come back to Australia, I was not too impressed with the I would say the caliber of the end of year showcases that I saw at the school in Melbourne, which is it's more focused on theater. The one in Sydney is more interested in also screen acting. In Sydney, they do a lot of that, but I was not so impressed. However, there is a vibrant theater scene, more underground, more off Broadway, in which I saw that the cast of these plays were entirely made of alums of the school where I had been. So I was thinking, well, they continue their training and they do other things, and that's also they may not be as fast as other students who finish Lambda, are totally ready to work. And I've seen some, and I was very impressed with productions at Lambda and RADA during the year. Fantastic seasons of fantastic plays. They are totally ready to work. Not so much for other students, maybe in other parts of the world. And I got a sense that definitely Paris, London, and New York are also the centers of the action for theater, for our Western theater. It was a fascinating journey. In fact, I'm continuing the journey with students in exactly 2 weeks, because this is really an ongoing project, and it opened up a lot of questions to me, and desire to also delve into a lot more material around the world. I'm thinking about theater in Japan, which has fascinated me, and I know there's so much more to explore in underground, small venues in Japan to discover what they're doing. it opened up a lot of questions. So it's an ongoing project still. In 2 weeks, I will be taking L'Avant-Scène, the troupe, on the footsteps of some of my sabbatical journey. We will be going to Strasbourg, to the TNS. So it's new also for these students who are used to go to the Conservatoire. Then we're going to Berlin, we're going to Ernstbusch to spend 3 days, and we'll finish the European tour over the fall break with 3 days in London. We are going to go to Lambda and RADA. So that will be continuing what I have started. What have I brought to Princeton about this experience? Well, what I've brought to the program at Princeton, last year, immediately after undertaking the project, I decided that I would also try to broaden the scope of the training for students. And I've developed a masterclass series inviting French theater artists to come to Princeton to teach the students of L'Avant-Scène, the troupe, but also the classes, some aspects of theater that I cannot train them in, I can't teach them, such as movement or dance. We invited a dance professor from the Conservatoire, Caroline Marcadet, who was the first professor in charge of the dance department at the Conservatoire. This was a new reform in the 90s when she was invited by Marcel Bozonnet. We invited her. She did quite a poetic masterclass on movement and dance for the students. We had a masterclass on mask for students at L'Avant-Scène. That was quite exciting with 2 theater artists who work on mask, neutral mask, because they only had 4 days, but that was fascinating to behold. We had one masterclass with Sandy Ouvrier. I will mention Sandy Ouvrier very, very briefly. But Sandy Ouvrier does a fantastic work at the Conservatoire, mixing movement, body training with text, with the importance of text. And I think she does it very, very well. She doesn't distinguish the two. It's not, on one hand, exercises body, and then the text, work on the text. No, she brings them together. And I think this is a fascinating approach and pedagogy that she's developing at the Conservatoire. Always starting classes with some training, with some réchauffement du corps. And then she moves on to text immediately. Great results. Text is very important, but she brings it through the body, through performing with your entire body when you tackle the material of the text. And to anyone who is in Paris, don't miss showcases at the end of the year by Sandy Ouvrier and her class. Every year it's an event. It's always quite wonderful. And we brought Sandy Ouvrier to work with the students, but also someone, an artiste associated artist at the TNS. Her name is Anne Théron, and she came to lecture on contemporary theater, contemporary European theater, and also presented the students with texts and playwrights that are just being reviewed in France because she's part of a commission for playwriting. So that's the development at Princeton. This year we're on for a new masterclass series, and we're inviting, we just had a brief one with Pascal Rambert, who was one of the guests of the Princeton French Theater Festival. He worked with the students on one of the plays we're doing this semester. We will bring Xavier Gallet, a performer with Arthur Nouziciel, but also a professor at the Conservatoire National Supérieur d'Art Dramatique de Paris. We'll have also Nicolas Bouchot to work with students on Molière, or Élise Vigier, Kevin Case, their playwrights and director. The young scene, the people representing the new stage in France, Thomas Bouvet, who was for a long time the assistant of Pascal Rambert, and Astrid Bahia, who will come and work on a play she wrote to open up on different aspects of French theater, and hopefully Mathieu Boer also, who will come and do a masterclass on cinema and music. So that's something that I wanted to bring back to Princeton. And last summer, I wanted to tell you about this exciting project that I led, directed, and taught. It was a global seminar. Every year, Princeton teaches around the world during the summer a global seminar. Usually there are 6 every summer. And this time, for the first time, the global seminar, which was created 10 years ago as an experiment, now they have 6 a year. For the first time, it happened in France over the summer. Last summer, we spent 6 weeks in Paris. So that's a Princeton class and a Princeton credit. But my students were not the typical students who are drawn to French theater for the language, for the training. They were students from the program in theater, students from other subjects at Princeton. And the idea was to present them, to introduce them to French theater nowadays in Paris for 3 weeks and then at the Avignon Theatre Festival for 3 weeks. Lots of surprises because we saw 35 plays in just 45 days. So you can imagine that was a heavy load. But also they were, I believe that, I'm not sure there's a global actor somewhere, but in every country, in every different tradition, people can be influenced, hopefully, by other traditions and start being influenced, and that will change their perspectives on their own work. And I'm really curious to see what these students attending the global seminar this summer for 6 weeks, and they were privileged to see things at the Comédie Française and then plays at our national theaters, and then in Avignon to meet with a lot of guest speakers and also meet cast of some of the plays, directors. What will they bring back? Or what will happen in a few months, in a few years? Some of them want to become directors, and they saw the work of Thomas Ostermeyer, they saw the work of Katie Mitchell, Ivo Vanov, and they got to meet with them as well. What will happen? I'm very, very interested in continuing to look at their works because I think it'll be interesting. And that's how I think you can start influencing people and also students. They were very surprised at the level of political theater. They did not expect to see so much political theater, so much of these questions, contemporary questions in plays that we saw in Avignon. Sometimes they were shocked. They were very shocked by Les Damnés, The Damned, by Ivo Vanov, very shocked by the dress rehearsal. They were not shocked at all by Angelica Lidl. They saw a performance by Angelica Lidl. She's a performing arts performer, artist. But they were not shocked at all when I thought they would be, but they were not. And it'll take time for them to digest what they've seen. In the same token, at the Conservatoire, some students traveled to Princeton. They did this exchange program a few years ago. It's a small group of students, only 15 out of the because there were only 5 a year, but only 15 went and did this program that lasted for 3 years. One of them was Pierre Ninet, by the way, who now is on to an exciting career. It was his first time in America. And for them, it was a complete discovery because it was a completely different immersion in a university in the United States, a different environment. So they had to learn a lot. Like when I take my students to the Conservatoire, they have no idea of the world of the Conservatoire, or spending 3 years doing only one thing. To them, it's foreign, and that's why it's interesting to encourage them to do that. But some of these students who did this exchange program with Princeton at Princeton came back to New York by themselves, and they took 1 month or 2 months at private studios to further their training. That's a little thing, but that can bring some results. And in the same way, at Yale Drama School, a former student at Princeton, who was not my student because he did not speak French, Chris Gaffery, program in theater student at Princeton, but also a history major because you can't major in theater at Princeton, went on to go to the Yale Drama School, and he would come to all the plays L'Avant-Scène put on. He would not understand, but he was excited. He was curious enough to go to the plays. So we kept on, we're still in contact, and every time there is a French director visiting New York, or projects that are being implemented and done with the embassy, for example, I think of Chris as an opportunity for a French visiting director who wants to put on a version of his play in the US to meet Chris, and maybe that's an opportunity for him. But Chris has participated in some projects, and he's also, at the Yale Drama School, he has also directed Roberto Zucco by Coltas. He's very interested in doing a play by Rambert. That's a little seed, but that's exciting because he's really representing his own tradition, his own training, but he's been influenced a little bit, and hopefully that. So little steps. I feel like there's not one global actor, definitely not, but little steps, and more. There's an interest by these students all over the world to broaden their horizons, and also not just look at their local economy, local microsystem, but look for the world. Merci, Sarah.
I'm impressed by the number of trips your students are doing. And I'm just wondering who is paying for all that. But that's not really my question. I wanted to say that about the company in Montreal, which
Yes.
is Ubisoft.
Yes.
They do the same kind of exercises with l'UQAM, l'Université du
Yes,
Québec à
yes.
Montréal. And students are not only hired to do
Voiceover.
voiceover, but they are also hired for their movements. So
Of
they
course.
act,
Mhm.
and their movements are just
Right.
recorded with special things. I
Mhm.
mean, for video games, and it's a kind of way to do some money. I had a question about the videos and images, because I don't think you spoke about that, or I missed it. Is there any special training for the kind of plays, performances which use a lot of videos, because the acting is quite different? Like,
Yes.
they don't act, they become technicians. I mean, the way of behaving on a stage is quite different.
Yeah, well, they have a few screen acting classes in many curricula. Many schools offer screen acting at the conservatoire. Jeux pour la caméra. Sometimes it's quite costly, so it depends of the years when they can do this. If it's a master class, if it's a 1-year program, sometimes the question of the budget is in question. But they do that, and some schools do tend to do sometimes more. In Sydney, for example, they're closer to the west coast of America, and a lot of Australian actors also work in Hollywood. So they tend to also put forward that they are also training actors for the camera, for television and cinema. Not so much then in Melbourne, where it's a different tradition, a more theatrical tradition. But it's present. Theater schools, drama schools also tend to also maybe focus more on stage or drama, and for the video, some productions by students or professors do include, of course, video work that we now see commonly on stages in the world. To come back to your question about the trips, this one trip in France, there's an annual trip in France that is very dear to me, and in fact I created this trip after going myself see Phèdre by Chéreau, which was to my generation an event, because Patrice Chéreau was coming back to the theater. He took a hiatus of a few years, and he was coming back and he was doing Phèdre, and I had been bumped at Thanksgiving, so I had an extra ticket. I went in Paris just to see Phèdre. It was wonderful, and when I saw Phèdre, I also saw a play at the Comédie Française by the troupe of the Comédie Française. It was Le Dindon by Georges Feydeau, a revival of Le Dindon. I had so much fun, and immediately I thought I need to create this trip the following year. Students ought to come to Paris at the end of January, at the height of the theater season. And this trip is quite dear to me. I try to find the funding doesn't come that easy, but it's there at Princeton University. So we're fortunate enough to be able to find it, though it takes work also to secure it. But it's there, and it's exciting. When the Conservatoire traveled to Princeton, they financed their trip through subsidies or grants that they received from different organizations. And this year, if the TNS come to Princeton, which I really hope, we'll see, because they still need to gather the budget. And I will try on my end at least to secure their lodging in Princeton, their board in Princeton as well. I will try to secure that for them. We'll see what they can do. But helping not just for those students at Princeton to go abroad, but also enabling exchange and enabling to bring the students or guest speakers at Princeton is also very important to us. Florent?
Yeah, maybe something you didn't mention about the insertion of the students after the school, after the 3 years of school. It's also in France something very specific, and it that they can attend an organization, a structure called Jeune Théâtre National, and the Jeune Théâtre National is an insertion. It's not a school anymore. It's like an organization where they can stay for 3 more years, and when they are, and it's a and actually the job of the Jeune Théâtre National staff is to promote them. So the directors, when they make a production, they can come there and cast actors, and when they hire them, they pay only half of what they have to pay, and the other half is paid by the Jeune Théâtre National.
It's a great incentive program.
And it's for
TNS
Le Conservatoire, TNS, and SAT, or not?
And that's it. No, just 2 schools.
Just 2 schools. So 40 students a year. And another thing that the different schools we have in France has developed recently is that most of the students they study together, and when they go out, they create their own companies and they
collectives.
And they so there is one which is more involved into staging and actors. Sometimes they direct. I mean, differently, and it's also something new now that we have lots of company. Gosselin, Joly is more like this way of doing theater.
Yeah,
Cyril Test and many others. Yeah, that's what I wanted just to.
Thanks, Florent. I wondered if you could talk a little bit more about whether you saw a common trend in the types of physical training that's being done. Like, are we looking at Russian training, Laban, Comedia, a mixture of all of those things?
Well, they mostly always started with different training, but they sometimes differ in methods. I've seen some acrobatics course. There are gymnastics, basically, gymnastics for the body, and it's really acrobatics. So they will do a lot of movement. They will collide. They will work on their weights. They will do. It's quite. I have a few videos I could show you, but it's quite energetic. And then some training are much more. They're based on breathing exercises in the morning to really put forward the question of breathing, and then some others are more also clown training. So all of these trainings participate and partake to this question of the body training.
You didn't mention when l'avant-scène began. It was in 2001, if I remember well.
Yes.
And so, with all your experiences, can you speak to us about what become your actors? Do they become professional actors or not? And do they want it to belong to Actors Equity or to make a career without Actors Equity? What kind of actor are going out from your programs?
Well, in fact, they don't really become actors, because they are they study at Princeton, and if you graduate from Princeton and you want to be a French actor, you have no opportunities in the United States. So for them, the only way to become a professional actor is to go. Maybe some of the students went to Paris Conservatoire and they were stagiaires étrangers, so an intern for 1 year. They could follow different courses of study for 1 year. I had 3 students who did that, which was exciting, but most of them do not become actors. In fact, in Princeton now, the arts, they're taught, but it's mostly a way to enrich the experience of students. nowadays, some of them want to pursue artistic careers, but the main idea is that you cannot concentrate in art, in dance or theater or creative writing at Princeton. You can't. You can major in history, mathematics, French, and Italian, but you cannot in art. The idea being that you train academically, and then you go on the world. Maybe you will do a professional school later on, a Master of Fine Arts in playwriting or acting, but you will live, experience life, and then maybe you will become an artist to talk about life, to talk about many different things. But they do not become actors. I have one student, she just graduated, she went to a drama school in San Francisco, a conservatory there, which is great. And she will not forget her French theater experience, hopefully, and bring in her school French playwrights and help other students at the school discover French theater. But most of them don't. Some could, but then they follow more traditional careers, going through Princeton medical school, or they become lawyers, bankers. That's mostly what they do. However, now there's a new trend. Some students who love music decide to study music and go to a conservatory. They decide to. I have a student. He's learning conducting in Paris at the Conservatoire in France. One is in a conservatory in the U.S. So they understand that there's more to life than just traditional careers, but they're still quite more conservative in terms of their future goals. However, we are training the future patrons of the arts, who are going to become supporters, and we're training them to support the arts and to support what we're doing and what we're talking about today. So it's an important training still. Julie?
And Florent, have you noticed during all the travels you made, what was the situation of foreign students in other countries? Because I wanted to say something about France. That is quite interesting, and that in the Conservatoire, for example, you have a special statute for foreign students. That is not exactly the same as all the students, which is that you stay only 1 year.
Yeah.
Then after you don't have all you don't benefit all the things that normal students do. But also, you can have foreign students that do the normal
3 years.
3 years, yes. But I have to say that in France, we have more and more difficulties with those students for them to get their authorization to stay in France after these studies, which is a political situation quite amazing. And I know because I look after that. So we have these national schools that hire these students, and then after the government that don't allow them to stay in France. So it's quite a problem. And I wanted to know what's the situation, because it can be a solution to allow students to travel and to study in different countries. If we want to create something, really exchanges and all that thing.
Yeah, when students when they come to the Conservatoire, some of them, I would say 10% or 15% of these stagiaires étrangers want to stay in France. They find the scene thriving, lots of opportunities, lots of employment. So they try to find possibilities, work visas.
Even they come back and they settle.
Yeah, yes. They really a good number of them want to really stay there. And now these stagiaires étrangers at the Conservatoire, they're mostly from European schools now, mostly from Europe. Also, in London, for example, Lambda, RADA, they're run like enterprises. So they are run like big businesses, and they offer programs for students who are doing the 3 years as undergraduates. They have also the postgraduate program, and they also have programs specifically catered for international students from American schools doing a semester abroad. They have a whole range of programs to support the school, because in England, they receive some public funding, but they also need to raise money and to get money from tuitions. And in fact, when I mentioned briefly that I also looked at the built environment of the schools when I visited them, whereas it's a small, tiny elementary school that is being rent by the drama studio in Tokyo, or Lambda. Lambda had a campaign that was underwritten. I think that's how you say it. Underwritten by Benedict Cumberbatch, the most famous alum, to raise money to build a new wing of the school. And it's impressive. It's well done. But they raised money. They have benefactors. They organize a fundraising department. So that's run like a more Anglo-Saxon, very serious business. And they bring in international students because they understand. It's not exactly the same type of training, but they give the chance to international students to do that. And in Melbourne also. Students from the Pacific region. You had students from Thailand enrolled in the school, or students from Singapore. They come from all the region, and they come to VCA that may be probably cheaper to attend than Lambda in London, also the cost of living in London and all of that.
I'm sorry to say that it's 6 o'clock, or so close to 6 o'clock, that we're not going to take another question. But Florent will be around this evening. He will be around tomorrow. You'll have plenty of opportunities to follow up with him. Thank you, Florent. That was really fascinating.
Thank you so much.
And a view of the global theatre of the future.
Yes. Thank you.